This is a fun one, a new episode of Signs, a lot of great takeaways.
Yeah, we're going to talk about male fertility. Yeah. We're going to talk about giving credit where it's due, and also, and also a lot of things around humans in general coming up, a lot around gathering, and a lot around candor, which is a really fun conversation, and the power of candor and how not having it is not going to give you the payoff that you're looking for. So if you enjoy it, let us know, and tune in every month for Signs.
There's a lot of great takeaways. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Welcome to Good Thinking and another episode of Signs.
I have to clean my screen. There.
Perfect.
And here I am. I'm much better now. All right.
So are we. Live from New York. And warm as fuck Italy.
Italy? Yes. Which somehow is in New York in between the last podcast and this one. But, I don't really understand that. Anyway, it's welcome back to Signs. I feel like it's been a minute for Signs, but then when I looked at it, it's been the same amount of time. So that just says everything about how this month has felt.
A whirlwind nonetheless, but we're going to get into Signs, which are kind of accumulation of a few letters. And some, we don't want to call them trends.
Yeah, typically 4 letters. This time it is 3 letters and a very long podcast that involved can, which was really a letter and a podcast because there's so much in that letter.
And it felt like 3 months, really. Who are we kidding?
Yeah. So these aren't, I think, I always say they're signs more than trends because I think accumulating from 4 letters is too early to say they're signs, but ultimately they accumulate from all letters in so many ways. So
yeah. And some of
if
them
you're
are
a paid member, you can go
having.
back. Yeah. And if you're a paid member, you have full access to the archive. So you can go back and click on everything that we've talked about and find out more about all the things that we're discussing. And we're soon going to introduce a quarterly version of this that will be only for paid members.
Can't wait.
So get your sub now. All right. Are we ready to dive into Signs?
Yeah. Let's start. First one.
The first one, and obviously I put these in no particular order and we rename them as we go live.
Workshopping.
We always are workshopping. Always be workshopping. The first one I'm calling male orientation because we're reorienting towards male healthcare, which I feel like we deliberately, decided as society that women had been ignored for a really long time and that we were going to focus on women's health, which was great. Yep. And we're not going to stop doing that. But now we're there's a new conversation that's emerging around male health that I think previously didn't exist, but now is kind of coming out. And I think it's actually very much related to the women's health movement in the sense that it's the unshaming of all of the things that, so PCOS is now renamed to PMOS. There's a whole reason for that. I'm not going to get into the science behind it, but it's a good thing. It opens up the category of thing for women. But, that and menopause and perimenopause and all of these things that we've been discussing so many times. And now what we're seeing is that male fertility, sperm health, testosterone, needs, ED, erectile dysfunction, like all of those things are now coming out in a larger conversation. So now on TikTok, sperm maxing is really trending, like how to, if you spend any amount of time on TikTok, you know that one of the big phrases for men is your stock going up, or if you hang out with a teenager, then you also know about stocks going up. Yes, but, sperm health is very much related to your stocks going up, like wanting to make sure that you have very healthy, sperm quality. And I talk about this a little bit in the pendulum swing because I think as great as all of this conversation coming out is, when you actually look at what's causing some of it to come out, it's quite a sad underbelly of anxiety and look maxing and men having the mirror shined on them in terms of thinking so much about their health and but also their looks. And so all of this is very related. So it's, yes, great. And then on the other hand, you could look at it and say, where is this all coming from? And it's also coming from a world that's not particularly healthy. So, complicated. But
Indeed.
yeah, I mean, but on the one hand, I do think so there's a big conversation around previously it was really, shared or felt or, not just felt, but you were told that fertility was so related to women's health and it's if you're having fertility problems, then it's the, it's the egg quality, it's this, she doesn't have the right womb, whatever. Your ancient ovaries are no good. The list goes on. Now there's so much more research showing that early infertility is actually strongly related to sperm health, alcohol use, all of these things, which I think probably everybody who's gone through infertility suspects in so many ways, but it was just truly not part of the conversation and not really widely believed medically. So that's all changing. And there's loads of companies like Hone and Legacy and Mojo. I mean, all of these, the names.
So good.
The names are so good. But all coming out with kind of, I would say convenience would be the theme of the, it's at-home treatments, freeze your sperm without having to go into the office, get all of your hormones delivered to you, pretty much all health is going now, right? Where it's convenience is such a big portion of these healthcare things.
Yeah. Also probably confidence, right? So that they're not going and
privacy.
Yeah. I think that's probably
and making things easier is obviously an incredible way to get people to do it. So there's no shade on it. It's just, obviously much more related to convenience. And then the other thing that I related to this is that I'm starting to see, so there's obviously the claviculars and the look maxing and the manosphere of the whole thing. And then, but there's also a large conversation of men who are saying oh no, we're going to actively portray ourselves as not that online. And having large conversations around that, and male athletes coming out and saying, hey, I'm going to be the voice of saying, this is not healthy. We shouldn't be thinking this way. We shouldn't be behaving this way. And while it's not directly related to the kind of male fertility, space, I do think it's all kind of wrapped up together.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much conversation around, men and kind of next gen and, how certainly just having a teenager, just very, very aware of, how they're kind of coming into the space and what examples are there and because there's so many more, I think, than ever before. But I think this is fascinating because it's almost we did have to focus on, and so grateful that we focused on women for a while as far as medically and, getting things out there. And it's we got out of the shadow conversations. We have this conversation all the time, whether it is menopause, sexuality, kind of all of the things around women's health. And it's almost needed that permission to then be able to then take those same or equivalent conversations into men's health, which I feel that's what this is.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And I do think similarly, and this isn't part of it, but I do think the same is kind of happening in terms of silver health. I'm seeing a lot more hey, you have a hearing aid, let's talk about that. Well, let's not and one influencer I follow who's a silver influencer, she outed herself the other day of having, she's I've had hearing aids for 3 years. You guys have never noticed, but here they are. And I think that there's, in all categories, we're starting to see this behavior.
Right, which is amazing. Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah, super interesting.
Yes.
All right.
And swing?
We talked about the swing. The swing is really kind of, in my mind, it's the shaming of the whole thing. So there's so much shaming around look maxing and mogging one another and talking down to one another, and in the male kind of look maxing space, it's not positive. And so while there's kind of this unshaming happening, there's also shame happening around it, because it's oh, you have not great healthy sperm. This is not good. You're no longer worthy. So it's all kind of a little bit complicated.
Right. And then for brands, is it is it a matter of all brands, that have kind of a male audience being aware and then being aware how they can play a part potentially in this space? Or is it really, keeping an eye more on the men's brands that, have product in these space, Mojo? The names are incredible.
I mean, as much as I don't like this space, there's 100% a lot of brands who are taking advantage of the fact that this is like toxic or not, they don't necessarily care. So I suppose if you're just thinking in terms of purely capitalist pursuits, like it doesn't really matter. It's just knowing where conversations come from, I think, is a very important things for brand to be aware of, and not just kind of like it's great, like everything's unshamed, and it's like, well, actually, like over here, there's like a lot of shaming going on around it. I
Yeah,
think
I mean,
that's
I think
really
that's a great
important to
point.
know.
If you are playing in that space, just knowing that there's that swing, that is
Mhm.
clearly negative. All right, next sign.
All right. Clearly, I'm workshopping this name. So I'm calling it crediting because we're crediting the crediting. But, we'll see where we go with it. But, right now, there's literally not a day that goes by where you won't be at least on LinkedIn or anywhere similar where you're like, the AI is taking over. Nobody likes humans anymore. And like, it's just like, woe is me. And I don't really necessarily like side with that whole conversation, but it's certainly a large conversation. And yeah, I feel like I'm noticing more, or perhaps this is just my algorithm and my life, noticing more another side where people are actually kind of applauding the people in their lives and really crediting it. So, for example, I don't know if you spent any amount of time on the internet the last 2 days, but everybody was doing their couture shows, and like it's just been couture, and Balenciaga's back, and like this, and Dior is amazing and Chanel is perfect, and like everybody's making a comeback, guys. Like the luxury world is, people are excited again, which is nice to see. But
It is
anyway,
nice to see. Yeah, it's inspiring.
Balenciaga's couture show, at the end, they brought out all of the people behind it, and they all came out in their white jackets, and like it was a whole thing. And they're not the only brand that has done that, but I think more and more brands are starting to kind of show the people and give credit to the teams that are behind things, and say like, this is a very craft-driven enterprise, and these are the craftsmen behind it.
Right, and they've done this at previous brands, the designer at Balenciaga, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
great.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
done. And then while we were at Canva in Cannes, we saw the CMO of the B2B, Megan, and some other C-suite people from Canva. They were running the line at Pride, right? Like, so at the end of Canva had this very big week at Cannes. If you weren't at Cannes, they're one of the biggest like brands there. You should read the
It's
newsletter
probably in
and
your
see the
feed if you
pictures.
weren't at camp.
True. But they have a big Pride party at the very end of Cannes, and instead of them using the staff that they had previously used all week to run the lines, which is pretty much all of Canva's staff, they had their
Yeah, their team.
C-suite people running the lines so that their teams could celebrate and have fun. And I thought that was just no one was shining a spotlight on that other than us. We've talked about it many
Right.
times, but I think it's just very interesting to see like that kind of behavior, like company wide. Like it's
From
different if it's just,
a big company, yeah, which is
very
yeah,
big company.
amazing. Yes.
And then I wrote about this in the letter, but Youngblood, who's an artist, like brought on his tour manager on stage, and like he brought this poor lady who's probably like mortified to be on stage, and brought her on stage and talked about all the hard work that she'd done, and was, really giving her credit for the fact that he was there on stage, which I thought was lovely. And then we're starting to also see shot by like on the side of billboards. So when we were in Milan for Saloni, we kept seeing like big billboards, and then it would say like shot by this photographer, right? And I think that we're going to start to see generally, and some brands do this consistently, some brands definitely don't, but on Instagram we'll credit the photographer, and lots of reasons why they don't want to do that, but I actually think we'll see a huge proliferation of people doing that to say like, hey, like this is who we worked with, and this is the team that we want to celebrate.
Right, and part of that is maybe the AI, backlash, and part of it just to show that it was a real person shooting it, but then part of it is also kind of this crediting, which is like, who knows if it is, because our algorithms are both showing this, but it's like, it feels like a bigger movement. It feels like something that's actually happening. We all know that anything that any of us ever do is not done by one individual person. Like there are a team, there are people, we all need support in different ways to make things happen. And I think this is like one of the most beautiful things that could be happening now in this era of just like showing the people, giving credit to the people. I think, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. We see different people. Chappelle is a great example of this, like giving credit to their team and specifically
Mm,
calling them out. And I
yeah,
think that's
Kim's
what
a
we
great
saw
example.
Megan doing at the CMO party with her executive team. Like it's so inspiring. And I think it speaks so much to not just the flash of what's happening. Balenciaga is like the impact of everybody coming out in the lab coats. Like that was just rad to see. But I think it also speaks to then the culture. Kim's talked about the hiring process. Like there's so much reverberation that
Hmm.
happens internally, externally when you see this type of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I mean, we talked about this too, is that at Cannes, there was like kind of the two jury debate, and there was a lot of like, we have to give the human work the awards, right? And I think that would be an increasingly large conversation over the next year, especially if that's where the awards go, then typically that's where the work goes.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll see that more. And then meanwhile, like I think the pendulum swing to this is that even though AI is actually not taking jobs, like we actually have definitive surveys to say, brands that are typically brands that are using AI and those that are using it heavily are actually increasing headcount, not decreasing headcount, and junior headcount, not just senior headcount, which I think is another big conversation that we hear all the
Hmm.
time. But then actually brands saying, like, because it performs well for the stock market, saying it is AI. And it's like, it's not for
Yeah.
AI. It's because it does really well when you fire people for your stock because it makes everything look more profitable. But it doesn't sound very good if you say that, and it sounds much better if you're like, oh, well, but we're becoming very AI like focused, and therefore where our headcount has gone down. And that's just apparently all lies. So here we are.
Yeah. Blame it on the innovation. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I mean, that's great. But I think, thinking about the takeaway for brands, for executives, for CEOs, CMOs listening is like figure out where you can credit your team, where you can pull out, where you can highlight, a team member. I mean, it could be, as immediate as kind of a LinkedIn post. It could be a bigger kind of company wide, bringing everybody on stage. But I think just in some way figuring out what your individual as a leader, because everybody's a leader in some capacity, ability is to do this, and then even as a brand.
Yeah, and I would say in the pendulum swing, like, I also think that if you are a brand that's using a lot of AI and you are in fact hiring more because of it, like those conversations should be getting louder because the stories go where the stories are. Like it's like if you're not talking about it, then no one's going to talk about it. And I think that there's positives to come out of both sides, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. All right. I'm into crediting.
Yeah, I mean, especially on an internal level, like if there's so much AI anxiety and AI adoption anxiety, but then you're like, actually, like we're looking at it and we're increasing headcount, and like that's a really positive conversation to be having internally from a culture perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually brings up a really important point because we know that just in general right now, I would say the majority, I would say almost every company, like there's an unease about it, whether you can identify it, whether specifically they've had kind of these huge, layoffs or whether they haven't. I feel like there is an unease in kind of a corporate space. And so really doing this level of crediting, really pulling that in, having that conversation can help to, not completely erase, but certainly help to balance and create some positivity around culture and some stability and some connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we don't get into the AI training workshop space, but I feel like the conversations that we've had around the age of authorship, like so much of the work that we do talking to boards is about how do you think about this change positively, right? Because I think there will be a lot of positive change. And I think hiring and like it's like, hey, like the hiring is going to change. Like this is undoubtedly what's going to change. I think you're going to see people hiring ICs, like independent like contributors, like at a very high level. I think over the next year, you'll see more job posts for IC, like literally no
Mm.
title, like than you'll ever see before. So if you're somebody and it's like, hey, like let's talk about that. Let's talk about whether or not we're like bringing in ICs and why that is like a benefit to the company and like why that main site is important and what does age of authorship really look like inside of a company. You could have a very different conversation if you led with that than if you're like, oh, we really want you to adopt and like use as many credits as possible. But meanwhile, everybody at your company is like having a like literally shitting themselves because they think they're going to lose their job to this AI. And if you were coming out and smart and you're you are doing both, I think leading with the mindset of like, this is how you grow and this is like actually going to lead to growth of this company and this is why is incredibly powerful. But not many people are doing it. Only the, smart ones.
Yeah. No, but I think that's a great and really important conversation, and something we were talking about even before we got on the pod, as far as like, this is happening, and to bury your head in the sand or deny that it's not happening, like, it's happening, and there's a way to acknowledge it, face it, and then, pull in some positivity. I think when you're acknowledging it, people feel at ease when you're having the conversation. It's when people aren't having the conversation and rumors start and you wonder what the fuck's going on and what's happening. Are people going to be laid off and all of those parts and pieces? But if you really, face it head on and have that very open conversation, and most likely, and as we've talked to boards and companies, like, there are positives that you can lead with in that space that, can bring some
Yeah.
innovation and can bring some ease.
Yeah, quite honestly, if your next offsite doesn't include a conversation around this, but you have any intent of having AI in your company, then you're really missing the boat.
Amen.
All right, speaking about corporate gatherings, look at us, like segue.
Just flowing, really flowing.
So I keep thinking about this, like I've thought about this like quite a bit since we left Can, is how corporate gatherings, like call it B2B, like call it an offsite. I wouldn't even necessarily say these are always offsites. But company gatherings, let's say, are becoming huge sources of content creation opportunities that then I can't say that word today. Proliferate. Maybe we'll change the word. Give reach to, or give the ability of the people that you're inviting, mostly I would say creators, and I think creators are a portion of this. So these are events that are not necessarily just for your internal team. Although Starbucks is, for example, doing a lot with incentivizing internal content creation, and they're doing like a whole system with TikTok, and it's a whole thing.
So smart.
And so I could see them, for example, doing something like this where they then, in a year, bring in this kind of content creation. They throw a big event for them, and it's like our top creators. Like, this will 100% happen. Like, if it's not on their to-do list, it will be. But these events are becoming truly no longer closed-door events, right? They're being designed as open sources of content creation. So Can is it's no longer about the awards. It's really not. There should be a component of that, but there's really kind of many worlds happening at Can at the moment. And one of them is creating a place for content creators to come and, meet and connect and obviously sign deals. And essentially I've talked about it, they're essentially one human, ad machines, it's like a little ad unit walking around, which is so bizarre. But it's they're also there to make content. And the last week, it's just been it was terrible. I was waiting for Can to be over. It was can my feed
It's a lot.
catch up?
You need a button. It's okay, I've had all the recaps.
Yes, I've had all the recaps that I need. But it's truly the number of content studios and podcast studios this year, everybody had a content studio and everybody had a content plan and everybody was inviting content creators to interview their CEOs. That was not happening last year. And that is very much happening this year. The other example that we've talked about a bit already is Oatly had a corporate gathering called Aftertaste, and they did it with Care of Chan, the event company, and it was a real production. This was not a small endeavor. And they invited, interestingly, a lot of smaller, I would say not small in the sense that they have huge followings, but smaller in the sense of they're not a Starbucks gigantic conglomerate. But smaller shops to talk about, and they were kind of the stars. There were a lot of Substackers interviewing these stars. That was kind of the model. Substack had their media summit, also made deliberately for sharing. It was, there for the creators, but it was there to live on beyond. And then there are smaller examples like Goop Kitchen working with Katie Stone and doing a lot of kind of people doing events to create opportunities to gather, but knowing that it's going to extend beyond.
I mean, I think this speaks to, I think, a couple of kind of conversations or signs that we've been having for a while. One is kind of, and this has been years now, but I think we're really seeing it maybe in the last 6 months, year, that, B2B is really B2C. There's a customer always. So it's and I think there's so much excitement around maybe because it's different or because B2B is kind of stepping up and producing things at a certain level that's inspiring to see. I think there's that on one end, and then on the other end, is maybe a more recent conversation, but we've been having for a while as far as, internal brands, internal employees are creators. Like make them creators. They are your ambassadors. They're there for a reason. They're excited about it and give them the ability and the leeway to do something. And this feels like kind of the perfect storm of both of those things if you do it right. Like who
Yeah.
wouldn't want to share that? Who wouldn't want to be a part?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this a few times, like, so maybe we can call it a trend. But it really is
What?
like,
You heard it here?
paradigms,
Yes,
where like all of these people have been
exactly.
doing it. But now we're just seeing like it's literally like it's one after the other now. It's not like an individual, like a few early adopter kind of industry, like insightful. Like it's like, okay, now this is really, really happening. And I think it goes to show like there's also something hidden in here, or not hidden in here, but like something to talk about where it's like people want to know how your business operates, and they're actually quite interested in how businesses work. And consumers are super, super savvy. Like they get it. Like they know that you're advertising to them. Like no one is unaware of your ploys, you know? And I think that it's just interesting to see, like, especially after Cannes, it's like these people are not necessarily, like, some of them are B2B content creators, like they're showing content creators how to create content careers. Like, it's like a
Right,
lot. It's like,
right.
it's like the nesting inside of the nesting.
Yes,
But like some
yes.
of them are just like people who are, like, I can't remember the name of her, shocking of shocks, but there's this like one creator that we met there who I follow all the time, who has this
Gabby.
really like Gabby falls more into I'd feel like both, like she's a content creator and then like teaching you, and then this was somebody we met on the street with Pantone, and she is just a fashion, like, content creator. Like she's just there. But she's been making content all week from her, like it just doesn't stop. But it goes to show that her audience actually cares about that, right? Because that's not her
Mhm.
typical content. And she has found a way to segue it in and make it all work together.
I mean, this feels like so many trends in one. Like there's, the transparency trend as you were talking about. Well, but then does that really, that makes a movement, that makes a trend. But the transparency as far as we are interested in companies, and then the fact of, creators and audiences and personal brand not just not having to stay in a lane, like being
Mm-hmm.
kind of all the things because audiences aren't like, I am only interested in this. They're interested in all of the things that are relevant.
Yes.
All right. The swing.
The swing. What do I have here? Well, the swing is really like the anti-reach of it all. Meta glasses are, becoming bigger and bigger. There's devices listening to us all the time. Literally like I went to a breakfast and somebody was recording via granola. Like, it's like, okay, like this is a lot. But that's just going to get increase. Like, eventually you're not getting, now the photoshopped versions of the glasses, of the meta glasses, you think that you don't know that they look like meta glasses, but you still definitely do. Like those things they're not ridiculous like the Snap ones, but they are
Those are
visible. Like you
ridiculous.
can actually, those are like, I mean, we can't even. But the meta glasses, you can still really tell like the thickness of the frames, like the whole thing. Like it just still doesn't look exactly like a pair of glasses. But that era is, 6 months away from being not true.
Yeah.
Like we're not far off. And as that increases, I think we will continue to see the trend that we've been talking about, or this is certainly a trend of like wanting to say, no, like these spaces are sacred, and we're seeing it a lot in terms of music culture and dance
Yeah.
culture and clubbing culture. But I think we're going to see a lot of it in terms of corporate culture. Like I actually think we're going to have like a check your devices at the door situation, when what happens when your employee is sitting in there with their meta glasses on and they don't realize it and you don't realize it, and suddenly like whatever they were filming is like leaked onto the internet. It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
time.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I think we'll see it in terms of, like when you're on a plane and you look like looking across and like somebody doesn't have the screen protector on, like now there's devices everywhere. And of course they could take a screenshot of a video before, but now they might just inadvertently be filming you and not realize it. So
Super creepy.
yeah, but I also think it's an opportunity. Like I've talked about this like many times in travel. I really believe that we're going to see whole countries actually become like no-go zones for devices, and I'm sure that someone's going to do it. But I think,
Bhutan, here we come.
I mean, yeah, like I suspect it will be like somewhere like Monaco or like maybe Switzerland, like somewhere where privacy or
Mhm.
wealth is highly protected. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities in terms of, I think we're kind of beyond the restaurant era where we're putting little dots over people's phones. Like
Yes.
that's not going to
That don't
work, and
work anyways. Yeah.
that's not going to help. But I do think that there is a buy-in desire that is happening, and I think that there will be a lot more buy-in, like, yes, I want to leave my device at the door. How do you like, Yonder is one option that seems to be like everywhere, but there's not that many options, I think,
Yeah.
that feel really good. So I think that there's a whole like bunch of business like realms that are going to come out of this space.
For sure. Yeah, Melissa and I were having the brick conversation. Like, I think it's around, and I think honestly, like, not to bring up Can again, but at the dinner, like, I think there is was a relief to people. Like, really, nobody was fighting giving up their phone, and I think there's almost a relief when you're then in a space like that.
Yeah. So for context, we had a dinner at Can, and we
If you don't
invited
know,
all of this. Well, I'm not sure everybody listens to every podcast that we
good
are
point.
on.
What?
And we had a CMO dinner, and we invited everybody at the door when they came in to put their phone on a tray. And I think pretty much like everyone did except for one person, perhaps. So,
Yeah.
I
And with
think that
with ease,
there's,
like, I think there wasn't pushback
yeah.
about it because,
But
again, I
with
think
that,
there's a relief to it.
there was a relief, but there was also a trust thing. And I do think like, so with us, it's like this was a small event. You could trust this person at the door. Like they were literally standing there with the tray. Like they weren't going anywhere. Your device wasn't like wandering off into some like unknown land. And I just think that there will be more and more services. Like
Yeah,
bricking is 100% a voluntary thing, but you have to set up the brick. You have to do all this. It's not like you can just like randomly be like, go up to someone and be like, brick your phone. Like it has to be your brick.
right. Yes, yes. Exactly. Okay, I'm actually pretty into this next one and pretty into this name. I think you nailed it.
At least one. All right.
Yeah, yeah. 1 of 5.
So we're calling this Candor Capital. So founders are making candor work for them, and honest conversations are being sought outside of the comment section. So we talked about this on a pod that just came out with Byron from Tapped In, and it's an example that I really, really love, and I think it's actually like quite wild how little it's been talked about.
Yeah, yeah. So give the
So
backstory again, because I do think we haven't heard
yeah,
enough about it.
Topicals, which is a skincare brand, the founder purchased a hair care brand called Bread. Bread was a popular brand before, but very niche. And she came in and she kind of like worked, like Topicals is very, very successful, right? And so she was like, I'm just going to take Topicals and I'm going to put the Topicals formula, essentially, like not literally the formula, but like the growth formula, like on top of this company Bread. And like, that's how we're going to grow. And the first product that they released, like completely flopped, like just did not hit. She said that like there were a few hundred sales, like whereas a product release from Topicals would be like, millions of products sold. And she had invested her own money in purchasing Bread, and like it's very much like a part of like she wants and also needs it to grow, And instead of like being like, well, the consumer is stupid and like, like whatever the story is that everyone would tell themselves if they had a flop. And she's not a very online founder, so I have to say like her next move is not like the formula move, if you get what I mean. Like it's not like, oh,
Right. She's
done
not like
this
a big
before.
content creator that's like just coming on with a different message. Like it felt very much
Yeah.
like
So she
I'm a founder. I'm coming out of
Yeah,
you know.
Topicals is not a founder-led brand. It's a very creator-led brand, but it's not a founder-led brand. She is famous, but she's not the face of the brand. And actually that was something that she talks about in the post when she comes on and she basically is like, guys, like this didn't work. Like what did I do? Like what did the brand do? Please help me understand what didn't work here. And like tell me what you think the marketing play should have been, and like how do we write this ship together? Like, because I think Bread has like quite a good fan base, but like it didn't hit with that fan base either. And it didn't hit with her Topicals fan base. And they, like, it should have hit with both and more. So she comes out and she does this. And she also is like, I don't really believe in founder-led brands, but like the reception of this post, which got millions and millions and millions of likes and comments and reshares, she was like, everybody's telling me that I should be the face of the brand, but that wasn't really something that I want to do. But like, Anyway, so she's kind of learning in public, which I think is very brave. I think it's really something.
Very brave and very vulnerable and very it takes a lot to kind of, as a founder, as somebody that's like, she's been very successful and she wasn't. And I think just to be open about it and be vulnerable
Mhm.
and to ask people was really, it's fucking awesome. Very inspiring.
Yeah, and it very much relates to the conversation we were having earlier about viewing the consumer as being an expert. Like, she is assuming that they actually know what marketing does and how it works, and because they do. And I think so many brands forget that
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah.
We're running short on time, so I'm going to start speeding up. This is always how it goes. And then we have the founder of David, who a while ago had gone on. Emily Sundberg has been doing these kind of I would call them PR crisis interviews. She
Yeah.
also interviews people who are not in PR crisis, but she's kind of been opening up her feed to brands or founders, really, not just really the brand, to talk, kind of address the audience directly. And I think it's a really interesting model. And she did it a while ago, not recently, this was a few months ago. She did it before South by, and
Yeah.
she did it with the founder of David, and she really let her audience ask questions, and then he replied with those questions in the newsletter. And so how she does it is that she allows them to answer whatever questions they want, right? So she gets all the questions, she gives them the questions, and then they choose the questions that they answer, which I think is a very democratic way of doing it. I think that there's probably some of that needs to happen. Then I think she should force maybe a few questions, a little bit like Katie Couric style, don't let them just pick the easy ones. But that's up to Emily to figure out. But right now, that's how she does it. And he chose to answer some pretty hard-hitting questions. And I think the reception on that particular interview was very pivotal for them. There had been a lot of kind of naysaying and negative talk around David, and I haven't heard as much of it since. And then the other thing that we've talked about, and we've talked about this in The Last Signs, so if you didn't listen to The Last Signs, you can go back and look at this in much greater detail, but is the kind of the shift that we're seeing around kind of private conversations. So people going to Substack, paying to Substack in order to just be in the chats with people who are particularly like them, or how some people are getting completely out of the comment section and relying on a group chat. I can't tell you how many marketers I know say that now they don't even go on social media unless the link comes from the group chat because it's already been filtered for them. And they're if it's not through my group, I filter my friends who filter my links, who then filter everything else. But this is how we're operating. It's very closed spaces, more niche conversations, private conversations that you guys don't know are happening. Brands are not invited to those.
Yeah. It's a form of community. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. So it's all related to kind of places where you can have radical candor. We also talked about this after Salone, but I met the founder of Yellow Trace, and she was saying that people were sharing what they really thought about people's setups at Salone with her in the DMs, but they weren't willing to go on record to say what they really felt because they knew that they would be cut out of the conversation. And that's probably always been true in terms of candor, but I just think it's interesting because they are still sharing it with somebody who's quite public. They're just not willing to share it in
Yeah, well, I think it's looking at the founders in this case. I think they're great examples who did share with that candor, and it paid off for them. And they didn't do, they did it to find out information. Maybe the founder of David did it to kind of get past it, but get past his challenges. But I think there was a purpose in doing it, and there was a vulnerability. I think the thing about candor is you have to have something to lose in order to express it. If you don't have anything to lose, then it's not really candor,
Right.
which I think brings us to the swing.
Right. Which is a swing that is also related to Emily. So Emily interviewed Zuck in a similar way that she interviewed David. And we won't even get into the backlash because I have so many feelings on why that happened and why. And even today, Lenny podcast came out with an interview with Adam Morrissey. Why is there not backlash against Adam, against Lenny? Or the Wall Street Journal this week is sponsored by Palantir, but meanwhile, nobody's canceling their Wall Street Journal subscriptions. But anyway, so the backlash against this aside,
Yes,
Mark Zuckerberg came on to Emily's platform, and she also did a video interview with him, and he basically chose questions that weren't involved no candor. and it was like the video was a little bit like robotic, and it could have been an AI version of him for all anyone would know. And I
Sure.
think that increased the backlash, right? Like, there was already backlash to the fact that she was interviewing him,
Yeah.
and then he increased the backlash by not having candor, like answering candid questions and answering hard-hitting questions, and I think he just did himself absolutely 0 favors.
For sure. And I love the equation of no candor equals no payoff. And I think, again, like now we're just gonna, if we bring up can, it needs to become a drinking game. But I think that was one of the things about the panel, the conversations at Can. Like there was no candor. You weren't learning anything new. It felt very kind of like PR machine. I think if it is that, it's like not only is nobody necessarily tuning in, but there can be backlash to that.
Yes. I will say that when you look back at the enormous amount of content that came out of Cannes, very little of it was the panels. There were a few people that like clearly hit with like a few lines that people seem to really, really like. But when you look at the majority of the content, like if you think about the number of panels that happened at Cannes, like that should be based on just the virtue of the amount of space and time it took up, should have been like 89% of the content that you saw come out. And I would say it was about 11% of the content that came out. So that speaks to kind of what that does for you if you don't do it. All right, let's
Yeah, 100%.
breeze through this last one, which I do love,
Okay.
and it is related to other things. So
Say it
I'm just
quick.
saying, yeah, it's kind of small thing, but it's also a big thing, right? And it's around, and it's quite related to kind of one of the other topics that we had, but it's around commissioning actually handmade moments. So I'm seeing a lot, and it's funny, like how, like I mentioned something in my newsletter like a few months ago, and I was like, oh, you should hire live artists. And then it was suddenly like, oh, like Adam Faze hired a live artist. And it's like, I'm not saying that Adam reads the newsletter, but I think that there's just like an energy that happens like at the same
Oh, for
time.
sure there is.
But there's a lot of people, and it's partly because what goes viral online, but there's a lot of people who are going out to live events and drawing them, and then their content goes viral. But we're starting to see so many more people, instead of hiring a photographer, or it's a yes and, hiring live drawing like artists who draw and sketch live during your event, and then like that's the kind of takeaway and the big moment of it. And I think that's just really, really interesting. And then we're seeing like Fred again hired like so Fred again did a tour, part of his tour in India. And in order to make his Indian poster, he hired like a sign painter, like one of these like classic artists, and he hired them to make the sign by hand. And then of course all the content of the sign and it going up is all this guy painting, which is really, really beautiful. And then we're starting to see things like Soufflash, which is I think Australian, but don't quote me on that. But they're like a repaired, I don't know, service. And instead of doing kind of like patches or anything, they do kind of these like flash tattoos on people. So it's like, hey, I have a stain here, and they'll kind of like flash tattoo sew onto your clothes like little like embroidery to like make the stain like a part of the garment. And you can pick and choose from the flash tats, but it's all like very imperfect and like designed to be kind of like showing off also the human imperfections of your clothes.
Mhm.
And nothing about this is new at all. Like, I think we've done this so many times, like, throughout history, is like, we like handmade things as human beings. Like, nothing about this is revolutionary. But I think the conversation around it and the desire for it, the appetite has never been higher.
For sure. I mean, and I think it's only growing. Like I think about even just, kind of some billboards, whatever. I think about in Venice, it became like hand painted, right? Like that
Hmm.
became a big movement for a lot of outdoor. And I think we are seeing this way, way more. And I think it is like an AI thing. It is, and we've talked about this a lot, showing behind the scenes, like showing that there is some type of human made aspect of it. And then I think there's also like the luxury end of it. Like when something is hand done, it does feel special. It does feel limited. It does feel just unique. And because it is. And I think we're
Yeah.
only going to see that more and more. So I think it is something that's bubbling up more and more. It is something that's becoming a bigger trend. And again, something for brands to be aware of, if it's the right for them, like what is the version that they can bring in of
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. And then the pendulum swing is like, we're creating things like there's a new service called Eternal that will take your health stats that you have like consumed and throw it through an AI generator and generate you a podcast about your personal health status, which we nobody needs. But, there's just
Not even me.
the ability to, so we talk about in the age of authorship that there's like the ability to create anything, but then there's also a need to create things that matter. And like there's very much like a non-filtering of like AI, I don't know if I want to call it slop. It's like AI create tooling that is very, very unnecessary.
Yeah.
All right. This was fun. Thank you for coming. Gotta run.
Yep. If you enjoyed it, share it with somebody. Let us know your thoughts and give the algorithm some love.
Awesome. Ciao, ciao.
Stay curious.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.